The Tiger King of Princeton baseball, Scott Bradley, gives us lessons on hardball and life. Diamond Diehards is on. Joe Rizzo here, bringing you baseball along with our esteemed guest, Coach Scott Bradley, whose patience I'm testing right off the bat. This is Joe Rizzo. The dog Jeff Healy has this one off, so it's just us tonight. If you're watching the live stream, forgive that little glitch. If you're not, then you don't even know what happened, so forget about it. We encourage you to interact in the comments and share if you're watching or listening on demand. We thank you and want to remind you that it's important to us that you subscribe, be it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere else. Join our Facebook group. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and all the social media sites where we are at Diamond Diehards. Literally subscribe right now if you're there and you have a chance to do it. And check out fmsgraphics.com for all your printing and promotional needs. FMS Graphics is a family-owned, family-run business for roughly 50 years. fmsgraphics.com. Give them a shot. They did for us. So we do something called Veteran of the Day. Usually that's delivered by Dawg, but Scott and I have talked offline, and he has a very special Veteran of the Day. So we are going to bring him right in. And it's Scott Bradley with our Veteran of the Day ahead of his guest appearance here on Diamond Diehard. Scott, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. Well, Veteran of the Day for me is easy. It's my dad, Gerald Joseph Bradley, George Company, 3rd Battalion, 5th Marines, part of the 1st Marine Division in Korea. My dad was part of the Chosin Reservoir campaign. And for anybody that has looked into Marine Corps history, it's one of the more memorable and talked about campaigns ever involved, that the Marine Corps was involved in. It actually was a retreat. They were completely outnumbered as the Chinese soldiers joined the Korean War. Were told to hold the Chosin Reservoir for a while, and then as they were completely surrounded, they got orders that they were going to have to, fight their way back. And the temperatures through this were minus 30, minus 40 degrees. MacArthur was warned, don't go into the hills of Korea in the wintertime. So extremely proud of my dad. And it's interesting that as I've met former Marines through the years, and I mentioned my dad's service and I mentioned where he served as part of the Chosin Reservoir, people's heads just snap back and they talk about that it's Marine Corps folklore, that it's discussed and talked about and studied quite extensively in the Corps.
Yeah, that really is legendary stuff. And I did talk to our Veteran of the Day emeritus, Jeff Healy, and I mean, he was just blown away. He was like, of all the shows that I had to miss, it had to be this one. We could do a whole show just on that, Scott. That's really amazing stuff. And thanks to your father for his service. And that's a really great Veteran of the Day. I don't know if we've ever had a better one than that. And well, thanks for sending me the pictures as well. That's just really, I was blown away by that. The other thing I was blown away by was I managed to consolidate old school. I tried to consolidate you into one page, my friend, but that's quite difficult.
I'm old, so I've been around for a while.
You got a couple of years on me, but not too many, but just a couple. So I remember very well your playing career in the majors. You came up with the Yankees for, I guess a couple of season cup of coffee there in 84, 85, moved on to the White Sox for a very short time. And then, the majority of your career with the Seattle Mariners, where you had some really great moments there. After that, you've become a pretty legendary coach in the area of college baseball, although your Princeton Tigers are on hiatus now, I guess, for a second straight season, right? So I sometimes like to start in the past. In this case, I'd like to start in the present and just have you level set us a little bit with what's going on with Princeton baseball. There's a lot of buzz about college baseball right now because you see, Jack Leiter throwing these crazy no-hitters at Vanderbilt and people watching it all over. But the Ivies are on hiatus.
We are, and I think it was a very difficult decision for the for the Ivy League presidents. They decided to cancel all spring sports and Ivy League competition. You might see track and field and a couple teams when April rolls around be able to qualify some guys maybe for nationals or something like that. But the Ivy League schools are just so uniquely different. You have Columbia and Penn that are in cities. You have Dartmouth and Cornell that are very rural. So all our fall sports were canceled. We didn't have any students on campus at all in the fall. The original plan was to have freshmen and juniors on campus in the fall, and then sophomores and seniors in the spring. And so at that point, there's no redshirting in the Ivy League. A lot of athletes decided to take gap years because of the uncertainty. So that's really the only way that you can preserve your year of Ivy League eligibility is to withdraw for the year. So most of the teams were very short staffed to begin with. Our whole junior class decided to take a gap year. Harvard and Yale both had a number of athletes that decided that they weren't going to participate this year. So it just became a really difficult decision. And I think, the Ivy League presidents really want to, at some point this academic year, be able to have some in-person classes. So I think they were concerned about doing things differently for the athletes, having the athletes play and travel and do all kinds of things. So, they made the decision to not have any games. Our players are terrific. We're allowed to practice. We're sort of within our own little bubble right now. So, going back to my professional days, we're trying to run a player development camp with our guys, try to really work individually with their swings and, defensive work, pitchers, bullpens. And then, we have an opportunity to sort of inter-squad and do some live type situations on the weekend. So we're making the most of it. This pandemic has impacted a lot of lives, around the world. So we try to make sure that our guys are no self-pity and that they're grateful for what we can do.
What about summer leagues for the players as individuals and stuff like that? Is that an option for them, or are they restricted by some of the Ivy League rules and guidelines at this point?
Nope, no restrictions whatsoever. So we have virtually all of our players that don't have, internships, which a lot of the older Princeton guys do. So, we have guys that are playing in the North Woods League. We have guys at the Coastal Plains League, the New England Collegiate Baseball League. So it actually is a nice situation because a lot of times coming off of a full season, not as much the Ivy League, but, the Power Five conferences that in playoffs and College World Series, they end up playing 65 or 70 games. A lot of those kids, their coaches don't want them playing summer ball or really limit, say, all right, you can go play and get, another 50 at-bats or, another 20 innings. But, teams were very interested in the Ivy League players because they know that we haven't played. So, we love for our guys. We expect them to go up and play all summer long, and there's no restrictions whatsoever on amount.
It's kind of harkens back a little bit to, the way we develop players as kids, meaning you go back to the early days when it's just T-ball or early ball, where you're only worried about fundamentals. That's really all you could work on. And you're just learning the game and you're refining. And you're never really getting the chance to bring it out into real game situations until whenever, somewhere down the line where it's sort of more important, right? I wonder how this is going to affect your players. Like if you, or even affect the way you coach, like, is it more, visible and tangible to your player now, the importance of fundamentals and working on them over and over and drilling them over and over and over, even at a higher established level, do you think?
I really don't. I'm a real development person anyway, and I believe development is what you want to start with, and then the results will come. And I also believe that the real nuts and bolts, as I call them, of baseball, are hitting, throwing, catching, running the bases. So it gives us an opportunity. Those are the fun parts too. So for our guys to be able to come down and really work on their swings, really, work for us, hitting to all fields. The guys that can run, we have them working on, bunting for hits. Pitchers really have a chance to, because we're not playing games right now, other than some scrimmages, can almost combine, a velocity, long toss, weighted ball, light ball type of a program, and still, pitch and work on their mound, their deliveries and things like that. So we're really just trying to focus. When you say fundamentals, to me, the fundamentals are the skills. The better we can make our guys as hitters, the better we make them defensively. It's really, we have time to sort of experiment a little bit. We'll break out, the videos and slow things down a little bit, make some changes where normally if we were playing in a season, we wouldn't really be making a whole lot of changes, with guys, especially with our young players. I mean, I think we'll really see this next year, that we've been able to really be hands-on with our freshmen. Because most of the time, once the season starts, like I said, the last thing we want to do is to try to, the young kids, throw too much at them in terms of instruction when they're getting ready to compete in their first, college season. So we'd like to think that we're going to be, by the time next fall rolls around, that our young guys are going to be a little bit further along in their development than they normally might have been had we just been playing games.
And you're going to have 3 classes of guys that are playing their first season, right? Your freshmen, sophomores,
Yeah,
and juniors.
exactly. I mean, our sophomores right now, we played 5 games last year before the season was shut down, no conference games at all. So, so when we play our first Ivy League game next year, we're going to have 3 classes that have never played in an Ivy League ball game before.
That's crazy. How are you keeping your attention, coach? Like that's it. Like you're always gearing up, right? For every year you're gearing up to I mean, as soon as you're putting you're probably figuring out like putting the schedule together. Then once you've put the schedule together, you're figuring out all the logistics around that. That's removed, right? I mean, there's your job
Not
has
really.
changed tremendously, right?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, Joe, not really. We're continuing to recruit. It's different because our kids are moving on. I mean, they're graduating, they're moving in the Ivy League. Like I said, they just don't stay. So we're constantly recruiting. We're scheduling in advance because, we have to continue to schedule teams and schedule spring trips and everything. And in terms of, we look at our scrimmages like now, like we're telling our guys, these are your games for now. So we really try to engage with our players. We really try to make them that every day when they come to the field, we want to get something out of it. They're in their strength and conditioning. And again, because we're not playing games, we can actually push them a little bit harder with the strength and conditioning than you normally would during a season where you would just be doing some maintenance type work. So again, we're trying to look at this as a positive, and we're trying to really develop our players, make them stronger, work with their skill set, develop some arm strength, and really be hands-on, this year. And we're hoping that it'll really help us out, like I said, when we can get back to normal next fall.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. I know the Dawg and I would love to come down and check out some of those games in person. It's not not too far a drive for us. So we're looking forward to that. I wish it was happening this year. We definitely, heck, we would have gone down there with a couple of headsets and taken up your time in person. We'd done it right at the field or something like that. So maybe we'll do it next time, and we won't blow the opening like we did today if we're doing it in person.
But in this Zoom world, this works.
We're gonna make it work. We're making it work. So also speaking of the present, the way that you and I now for those who don't know, usually when guests come on the show, it's like people that I've known for 30 years, like Mike Puma or Ray Montgomery or something like that. And sometimes it's people that were just meeting up. So Scott and I have never, I knew of his existence. I don't think he knew of mine up until just a few days ago. And you sent out a really great tweet, and it had to do with the tools of a catcher that you value the most. And I responded in the Diehards Twitter about, if you had the choice then between like a Mike Matheny or a Mike Piazza in their prime, where one's recognized as a super defensive catcher who doesn't have, much of a bat, and the other one's known as the greatest offensive catcher of all time. And there are certain defensive deficiencies that are common. I loved your answer. We talked about it offline. I wanted you to share that thought now with the rest of the audience, because it's probably not, as they would think.
Well, I'm a big believer that in any aspect of coaching, there's no real blueprint. You can have your ideas, you can have your thoughts, and even decisions. I mean, decisions, there's so many factors, the decisions that we make. And as you were talking about, yeah, if I was starting from scratch, you might sit back and say, okay, I want a really good defensive catcher, and I want power at first and third and speed in center, and you'd look at it that way. But when you're trying to look at it, you have to look at your team as a whole. I'm always interested when big league managers are named and people ask them what their style is, and you hear somebody talking about, well, I'm an aggressive manager and I love speed and all that. Well, he might be taking over a team that doesn't have any speed, right? So your decisions and the type of team that you create depends on the players that you have, right? So if I have a team loaded with offensive players, if I was playing in the American League where I could take Mike Piazza and move him into the DH slot to have Mike Matheny, or it might depend on pitcher-catcher relationship, right? We've seen that in the past. You look at, I think when you look back, I think at the Atlanta Braves, and this may be a little too far back for some people to kind of remember, but Javi Lopez was a star young catcher for them, and yet Greg Maddux wanted Eddie Perez, who was kind of a journeyman backup, to be his catcher because he was just more comfortable, with that. We saw it a little bit with the Yankees last year in certain scenarios. But the thing that gets misunderstood a little bit is when I talk about the intangibles for catchers, the leadership and all that, Mike Piazza was a terrific leader behind the plate. He had all those intangibles, yet offensively he was off the charts. He didn't throw real well. He wasn't great blocking, balls in the dirt. But all the pitchers that I talked to thought that he was a good target, that he called a very good game, that he knew how to work, the pitcher. He knew the tempo and the pace of the game. So yes, he didn't. Mike Matheny may have been the best blocker of balls in the dirt of any catcher that I had seen, and can really throw. But yet Mike Piazza had a lot of the intangibles and was more valuable defensively. Again, people just look at like throwing out percentage. I think at one point Mike went, I don't know, I think there were 50 consecutive stolen bases against him at some point where he didn't throw anybody out. There's a lot of factors to that as well. But again, you have to look at your lineup. If you have a team that's loaded with a lot of other offense, then yeah, you can have a defensive-minded catcher. If you have a team that's going to struggle to score runs, you better have your, and your catcher is your best hitter. He's got to be out there. And if you can't play him at first, if you're in the National League, if he's not somebody who's capable of playing at first and he can't DH, he needs to go back behind the plate and catch. And if, maybe you look at the hockey plus minus system, he may give up a couple of runs behind the plate because he doesn't block a ball in the dirt or because somebody steals, but he may hit a 3-run home run. So you might be +1 on the day having him in the lineup. So there's just a lot of factors. Like I said, it's not a blueprint. You can't just sit back. You have to look at your team. And then the other thing too is you have to look at each game individually, the pitcher you're facing, and you have to make a decision. What's going to be the best way for me to win this game today? Right? You could play a team that doesn't have a lot of speed. So if Mike Piazza is catching, teams don't run as much anymore. So you're not worried about him having to throw people out. So again, too many people think decisions are just black and white all the time, and there's so many factors, they change all the time.
I love the point about the intangibles, especially for a catcher, because to me, that's something that I call creates a winning player, like a guy who, whatever his shortcomings are, whatever his good things are, in the end, he's bringing something to your team that's not a tangible thing. It's not a stat. You can't measure it. You can't measure what he brings as a receiver behind the plate, making his pitcher more comfortable, thereby allowing him to stay in the lineup one extra time every couple of weeks or something like that, right? And to me, that also kind of rides into one of the next things that we've seen on Twitter these last couple of weeks, these hot things about the armbands that these guys are wearing out there, where somebody's just yelling a number from the dugout, and then a pitcher's looking on his armband about which pitch to throw, and they don't have to think the game or anything like that. They just have the coaches thinking about it. And my buddy Jeff Fry is, She Gone Nation is all about take the armbands and throw them in the garbage. It seems the old school guys definitely want players to learn and be able to think for themselves. But is this a trend that is just going to overrun from the highest level and come all the way down?
Well, it's already there. You see some interesting things in college baseball. I mean, between the armbands, we've actually played a couple of teams that have literally all the players in the dugout have big cards. Like you see sometimes on the sidelines in football when teams are calling plays and, they got 8 guys that have these big cards and they're turning upside down or whatever. Well, we've played a few teams where literally during the course of the game, every pitch, every pickoff play, everything is called from the dugout with these big cards that the players on the team are holding up. I'm so much more simplistic than that. I said in one of my tweets, and like I said, this Twitter thing is interesting. Princeton asked me to have a presence. I was never on Twitter in my life until about a month ago. And, I just decided, all right, they asked me to give it a shot. So, I'll throw some things out there and, we'll see how it goes. But I've never played a baseball game in my life where I was a catcher where somebody called a pitch for me. Never, not at any level, from little league to high school to college to, the MLB. And I think it's just such an amazing part of the game, the relationship between the pitcher and the catcher, that I would never take that away from the pitcher and the catcher. I really wouldn't. To me, there's so much more to be said about tempo and pace. About as a catcher, I knew that I was involved in the flow of the game, and you don't even see young catchers do it anymore. But you get the pitcher get going and used to start to throw the ball harder back to the mound. You don't see catchers throw the ball hard back to the mound anymore. You could see your pitcher in a big situation to be nothing about putting a little extra life on the ball back to the mound and giving them a fist pump and saying, "Come on, big pitch, here we go." Well, if everybody's got to stop and wait and look into the dugout to see what's going on and waiting. I mean, there are some terrific college programs where literally the catcher would throw the ball back to the mound, take his mask, put it on his head, get down on a knee, look into the dugout while the pitching coach was flipping through pages of notes, give the sign, the catcher would put his mask back on, get in a stance and put it, and 30 to 35 seconds going by in between pitches. To me, the rhythm, I actually caught a guy named Clay Christensen in AAA. And if he was a ground ball type guy. And if there was a ground ball hit to the infield, and as a catcher, I would run to back up first base. And as I was running back to home plate, he wanted me to look at him, and he wanted either me to give him a sign or he would give me a sign as I was running back to home plate. So as soon as the hitter walked in there, I was down. He wanted to deliver a pitch. So I just don't like the idea. I mean, and to be very fair, when you look at the Power 5 conferences in baseball right now, there's in excess of 20 or 25 college coaches that make $1 million a year now. And, their pitching coaches are making $250,000, $300,000. Their jobs are on the line. If they don't go to the regionals, their jobs are on the line. If they don't host regionals and win conference championships and stuff. And I've had this discussion with a lot of them, and they just say they're not going to put their livelihood in the hands of a 20-year-old, a 20-year-old, catcher. But I'm such a big believer in commitment. And, I think in one of the tweets that we had the other day, Peter Gammons jumped in and basically said that the best catchers he had ever talked to said that they spent the whole game trying to get the pitchers to conviction, trying to get them to feel, all right, I got this, commitment, making the pitch. And to me, very rarely is there a right or wrong pitch to throw. Joe, you might say that I want to get this guy out with a breaking ball. I might say I want to get him out with a fastball. If you throw him a good breaking ball, you can get him out. If I throw him a good fastball, I can get him out, right? Very rarely does it come down to the pitch. It comes down to the execution of the pitch. And I just think a catcher has the ability to get the ball back to the mound, to give the sign, to get that rhythm and flow of the game where the infielders work better. And there's sometimes where catcher's got to slow the game down. Maybe his pitcher's getting a little excited. Maybe he's had to back up first base. So maybe it's a situation where he's got to be able to just calm him down, take a little extra time. But to me, that's the most important aspect of running a ball game. And that's what I said. It's not just calling pitches, it's running a ball game. And pace and tempo to me is more important than the actual selection of the pitch. And I just don't know, like I said. And the other thing too is I feel like I'm pretty observant. I feel like I can read hitters, I can read swings. I can't do it the same from the dugout as I could from behind the plate. You know, when I'm behind the plate, I see the subtle little adjustments that a hitter might make. He might move his feet in the box a little bit. You know, I can tell, you know, the coach who's calling from the bullpen or from the dugout, you know, he might call a fastball and the hitter might take a really good swing at a fastball and he runs away from it thinking, well, we can't throw it. And I know the location was bad. I know we can still beat him with a fastball, but I know that the guy threw it in the middle instead of throwing it on the inside corner. Those are things, I don't care how astute you are and how observant you are, you cannot see that from the dugout. And we need to teach our young catchers how to read swings, how to read hitters, how to make adjustments, and always work with our pitcher's strengths. Again, I think too many people think we're trying to outsmart the hitter. We're trying to out-execute the hitter, you know, as a pitcher catcher. We can't always try to trick somebody because then we get into trouble.
One thing that you say you like to do is you advise catchers to go take grounders at third and practice turning double plays at second with their catchers met, right? In both cases, right? That has to do with footwork. It has to do with nimble, quick release, a lot of the thing. Go, first of all, stop what you're doing. Go into another browser and follow at Coach Bradley 9, the number 9 on Twitter right now. You will be glad that you did. The comments, which I don't think you could see, Coach, they're blowing up. A lot of great comments about, you know, the subtleties and, you know, just the way that you're describing things. It's really great. So I don't, if, you know, people don't care if I'm not talking much, they'd rather hear you. And I'm glad about that. Another thing you mentioned subtly was, you know, the catcher's there, he gets down on one knee, and boy, that's another hot button topic about the single kneel down catcher and you know, what is that doing to the catching position as well? Again, a lot of people think it's just absolutely crazy, and you see all these drills where, you know, the kid is holding you know, the inflatable ball into the arm. He's got his hand tied to the backstop, and he's got a knee down, and it's just crazy stuff. You know, we saw stuff, you know, back in when you were playing, like Tony Pena, I think was the first guy that kicked out the leg, but he wasn't on the knee, right? And that was like,
it was on one knee.
Oh, was he on the knee?
And his other leg was kicked way out.
That's right. You're right. Right. So he had the leg kicked out and he was on a knee, which everybody was like, what are you doing? Now all your shin guard protection is leaving the rest of you open, but he was Tony Pena, so he just caught everything. Right. But what do you think of this? You know, this has been a sea change. I mean, there's a lot of people that are teaching this technique to catchers from, you know, right from the get-go.
You know, it's interesting. And again, it goes back to what I said before. There's no blueprint. You know, if you have a catcher, and again, to me, and I mentioned it in one of the things when I would evaluate catchers, how important flexibility and stance is. You know, we see some young catchers and some high school age catchers that love the position, but their hip flexibility, their knee flexibility, and even, believe it or not, your feet and ankles don't allow them to get into a proper stance. Their butt is always up nice and high, is up too high, and they just don't look comfortable. Well, it's impossible for them to be able to catch a low strike. So if you get somebody whose flexibility is not as good, you know, maybe it helps if they get, you know, to a knee. But if somebody, like, I think the Yankees last year walked in and every catcher in the organization had to catch from one knee all the time, every single pitch. Well, if you have really good some good talented young catchers and they're catching fine and they catch the low strike fine and they're comfortable with what they're doing, to me, I don't think you make changes just for the sake of making changes. What I do like sometimes is when you so much, again, you have to ask the pitchers, what visual do your pitchers want? This is all about making the pitchers comfortable. And I know some pitchers, they want to see knees and shoulders. That's their target. That's what they're looking for. And now if you get down on one knee, they sort of lose the visual that they want. The pitchers should have some input in what the catcher's doing. They're also teaching catchers now to sort of have a really low hand and to sort of catch everything on the move. A lot of pitchers I caught, they wanted a target steady. They didn't want the glove moving, all over the place. The one knee thing to me, though, can sometimes, if I get into a normal stance, not on a knee, and now as certain pitches come in, if it's, say, to the a right-handed hitter on a ball that's down and away, and as I sort of reach to catch that pitch, sometimes my left knee will naturally drop as I catch. I like the idea of sort of dropping to the knee as I'm catching to receive the ball. That just helps to keep things quiet. But the idea of being on one knee all the time, being on one knee, even with guys on base. I know the stolen base is not a huge factor anymore. But I think you got to look at each catcher, individually. Everybody talks about the low strike. I'm amazed, with some of the stuff. To me, everybody talks about this idea of presenting pitches is the term now. It used to be, receiving and then framing. Now it's all about your presentation, how you present the ball to the umpire. Well, at the major league level, we're probably a couple of years away from going to an automated strike zone, right? With the K zone, the big league umpires call strikes. So why are they so concerned about, what the catcher is doing and spending all this different time when they're at the lower level? Yes. I mean, you see some, even at the college level, a couple inches outside, if you catch the ball properly and stuff, you can get strikes. But again, look at your guys. You can't coach and teach everybody the same. I mean, I've been around some amazing catchers that would never, ever want to go catch on one knee. So the idea of taking them to catch everything really well and saying, okay, well, here's all our information. You have to catch on one knee now. To me, look at baseball, look at hitters, look at pitchers. Everybody does think there's a lot of really good different ways to be successful. So the idea of making everybody cookie cutter and telling all the catchers now that they have to catch on one knee. I don't feel comfortable catching on one knee to start out. I like, because my flexibility is good. I can get into a good low stance still, even at my age. You may take somebody whose flexibility is not as good and do it, but it's not one size fit all ever, not in this game.
Send all your catchers to hot yoga. That's all I could say. It's life-changing.
You were talking to it just real quick. I want to just make a quick point about the ground balls and turning the double plays that you had said. And to me, the best catchers are converted infielders. Right? I mean, you look at guys, I think sometimes I worry if a kid is a catcher his entire life and doesn't play another position or hasn't moved somewhere else. The last time I checked a baseball field, the throw from third to first is about the same as from home to second. Sometimes catchers get so static where the only time they ever work on their throws to second is from a crouch, from the position. Sometimes the idea of going over to third base, fielding balls in rhythm, having to maybe move to your left to field the ball. It makes you more athletic. It makes you more of a ball player. We always work. Everybody works on everything else except the transfer. Well, you know what? If you can go over to second base and take throws from the third baseman and the shortstop, that some you have to reach up, some you have to reach down, that's just going to make your hands better. To me, the best, I'm old enough to remember, Johnny Bench, and I watched Johnny Bench play a lot, but as a counterpart, playing against like Pudge Rodriguez could probably go out to second base, and he spent time as an infielder and probably turned double plays as well as any second baseman in the game. So to me, it's just, some people raise some questions about, well, why would you want to do that? It's just about making you a better athlete. It's about cross training. It's about doing something different. It's about fun, right? As a catcher, if you're just behind the plate all the time and you're doing all your work from there, you just lose the feel of being an athlete. So that's why we like to do those type things.
I'm a big fan of, and I say it on this show all the time, I love the idea of catchers playing another position and just maybe, I'm talking about major leagues now, where a guy could play, if you're putting him behind the plate 100 times a season and you can get another 40 of them where he's out playing another position, third base, left field, first base, whatever it is. I feel like that's better for the team. And then you have two good catchers, right? Because the other guy's got to be pretty good if he's going to play 60 games. It doesn't necessarily have to be a straight lefty righty traditional platoon, but we used to see that more. Like, you played a bunch of positions in your career. Bench played a lot of third, right? I mean, why
You
did
played,
we
you
get
played,
away
you
from that?
played a little bit. Well, it's interesting because I'm going to go back to the veteran of the day, my dad. And my dad was played some ball, played some minor league baseball, and he was smart enough that the first thing he did is he taught my brothers and I, taught us how to catch. He taught us how to go behind the plate so we didn't blink, and we did all that. And then he literally took the catcher's mitt away from us, like in the little leagues and everything else. He said, go learn how to play everywhere else. You'll never forget how to catch. He says, that's something that you'll always have, but you don't need to be back here catching all the time at a young age. Go play shortstop, go play third base, go play outfield. So it just evolved that way. And I can honestly say, I don't think I would have had a major league career if I was only a catcher, but the fact that I hit left-handed, the fact that in major league games, I played left, I played right, I played first, I played third. And I played at a time when being a utility player meant that you weren't good enough to play somewhere else on a regular basis, where now versatility is, they pay for versatility now. So I felt like I was a little ahead of my time, but I agree completely. I take all the best team we ever had at Princeton. We had two catchers, one played third and one caught, and we literally flip-flopped them every game, and they were rested. They were in the lineup every day with their bats, and we just flip-flopped them each game, between third and behind the plate.
Yeah, you used to see it a lot.
We play a lot of double headers too, so that made it a little bit easier.
You used to see it a lot more. I can remember being at a game at University of Miami where Charles Johnson, who was one of the best defensive catchers of his era or any era, he was playing third base. Like, he was just at third base that game. And actually, the other catcher was Jorge Fabregas. So they had like two major league catchers on the roster, and they had a lefty and a righty catcher that both had long major league careers. But he would just go over and play third base. We used to see it more. I'm totally in agreement with you. The kid from the Texas Rangers, right? I mean, he was a catcher, and now he's their starting shortstop. So Kiner Falefa, I think I always mess his last name up, but
it's the other thing too, Joe, is like, you have to change it. Like, Billy Connors was one of the best pitching coaches that I ever had. I mean, Billy was with us in Seattle. He was with the Yankees. He was with, the Cubs and everything else. And one of Billy's favorite drills with the pitchers was, he used to say that pitchers nowadays, every time they throw, they feel like they have to they have to pick up their leg, and they have to do a windup and all that. And Billy's favorite drill was to put the right-handed pitchers over at shortstop and hit them balls in the hole where they had to backhand the ball, get it up, and make throws across the diamond. And the next week, he might, instead of just doing normal long toss, Billy would put him out in right field and hit them fungos and have them throw to third and have them throw to the home where they really have to stretch their arms out. He just wanted to make them become more athletic. And because we don't do as much of that anymore, I don't think there's ever been a period in baseball where, at least at my level, and probably the same with the youth baseball I watch, where pitchers have an extremely difficult time fielding and throwing to bases, right? Pitchers have a hard time picking up a bunt and throwing it to bases because they only throw from windups. They only throw by picking their leg up. To see that athletic pitcher who can come in, pick up a bunt, and throw from a lower arm slot because he needs to be quick, you just don't see very much anymore. And I think a lot of it is because, these kids are having pitching lessons and they're being instructed and they're going through all these different things all the time, and they just forget how to be baseball players.
Pitchers hitting, I love it. I don't know. I'm still and I'm an American League guy because I've always been a Yankee fan, but I think all pitchers should hit. And I like the idea of Ohtani. I love the idea of him hitting, and I think they should play him in the field on his days off. Why not? But so I'm with you on that. I like the guys going out there and look, there are some pitchers who really probably should just specialize in pitching and don't need to worry about the other things, but so many of them are great athletes, right? And
But it goes just sort of the same thing. It's, you have to look at each one. No, I don't want to see the pitcher who hasn't hit since grade school. I don't want to watch him hit. I don't want to watch him run the bases. But Ohtani's a different story. Brendan McKay, who was the John Olerud Award winner 3 times at Louisville, who made his big league debut, last year. And it's Michael Lorenzen with Cincinnati. The guys who are capable of doing it, yes. At Princeton, we've had a real long history of two-way players. Mike Ford, who's up and down with the Yankees now, was a terrific pitcher for us. Matt Bowman, who just signed a minor league contract, he had Tommy John surgery, but has pitched in the big leagues for the last 3 or 4 years with the Cardinals and the Reds, was my starting shortstop as well. David Hale, who was with the Yankees, who's now with the Phillies, played outfield for me as well as pitching. But we have some guys who, they're pitcher onlys from day one. It's what they've done. They're not hitting. They don't need to hit. They don't run the bases. But there are plenty out there, and I don't think it takes that much flexibility as a coach to get somebody their swings every day if they're also somebody that can help you on the mound. So again, you have to look at every case differently. And what's interesting, a lot of kids we have come to Princeton, some of our pitchers, we tell them they can hit in the fall, and a lot of them hit in the fall and they look around and they see the competition. At the end of the fall, they'll come up to me and say, Coach, I better focus on pitching because I know with the other hitters we have, I'm not as good as those guys. So it's almost like we'll let them make the decision. And most of the time they're smart enough to realize that it's time to focus on one or the other.
I also think at Princeton, did you ever have like a couple of math majors as in your battery who came up with like some really crazy signs that like only they could figure out?
We've had all kinds of stuff. It's interesting in that we had a catcher at one point who was named Jesse Levis, was one of the smartest kids we've ever had. And when he graduated from Princeton, he was, a mechanical and aerospace engineer. And I remember when I first took the job at Princeton, Randy Johnson came up to me and said, hey, what's it like working with all those rocket scientists? And I said, well, the couple rocket scientists we have on a team are actually really good baseball players. And he goes, I was only kidding. I said, well, I'm not. I said, we have 2 guys that are majoring in mechanicals, aerospace mechanical engineering, and they want to go work for NASA, at some point. But we have some amazing kids. A couple of years ago, we had Chad Powers, who was the Ivy League Pitcher of the Year, and he was actually a aerospace engineer and was also getting a certificate in finance. And he and Chris Gilio, who was one of our computer science guys, actually did a project with one of our teachers where they were working on an app for an iPhone where you could use your iPhone to video pictures and it would give you spin rate and velocity off your iPhone. And they were out on the field with a couple of our Princeton professors videotaping, marking up baseballs, using the radar gun and everything else. And they just got caught up in life. But they had all the calculations and formulas and stuff, and they were getting close, but they just both got high position jobs out in the real world. So they had to put that on the back burner.
And that's what happens. Jesse Levis, I think he was kind of a lot like you, right? Solid receiver, lefty bat.
That was a different Jesse Levis. Jesse Levis went to North Carolina. This was a different one that we had at Princeton. Jesse Levis went to UNC, played in the big leagues a little bit, left-handed hitting catcher, and really, really good guys. So yes, there were 2 of them actually.
Oh, and one went to your alma mater and one went to and one you coached.
Yep.
And I see you got your Carolina blue on.
You know what? It's not quite Carolina blue, but I wear a lot of black and orange. So anytime I can show my UNC colors, even though they lost in the tournament the other day, I try to.
Hey, at least they made it. That's better than Kentucky, right? So you still got it. You still got it over Kentucky for now. And Duke, right? Duke was out. So you still got it. You still got it. I've rooted for Carolina over the years, even though I'm a Fordham guy. So I think we're good on that. So you dropped Randy Johnson's name. That he must have been fun to catch, huh? Like that's, you're talking about calling games and doing this and that. How much did you have to call for Randy Johnson? I mean, that must have been like flying an F-16 or something.
Randy was interesting because I caught him very young in his career. So I was fortunate enough to catch his first no-hitter. And then I think the next time out, he walked 10 in 3 1/3 innings, something like that. So, he wasn't quite the polished guy. But the interesting thing with Randy is we found out that his mechanics on his fastball, he used to get really off balance, and he would overthrow his fastball, and he would be late, and he'd airmail the ball, up and away to right-handed hitters. The best way to get him back into his rhythm was to call a breaking ball. And his developed, so he never overthrew his breaking ball. He would slow everything down. So if he was one of those guys, again, he'd throw 2 fastballs for balls, and people think, oh, well, and he even said Randy's an interesting guy. If every other pitcher was going over scouting reports, Randy wanted to go over scouting report too. He had some pitching coaches early in his career that literally said, hey, you're big, just throw the ball down the middle, just throw the ball. And that bothered him. He wanted to pitch like everybody else. And then after I left, and you sort of watch him develop as a pitcher, his control became so good. The mix of his breaking ball, his command, just everything that made it what it is. But I told the story, the other day, that too many times, in today's that you go over these scouting reports, and the advanced scouts and these people say, well, this guy is not a fastball hitter. This guy, or this guy's a really good fastball hitter. This guy's a really good fastball hitter. Well, it depends whose fastball it is. So we were going over a report one day, and I forget who the hitter was, but the pitching coach and the advanced scout are telling Randy what a great fastball hitter this guy is. And Randy looked at me and looked back at those guys and goes, not my fastball. And, he struck the guy out 3 times and threw him all fastballs, never once threw him a breaking ball. It was almost like he was going to prove a point. The other thing with that story too, Chris Young, who played for me at Princeton, big 6'10" Chris, who's now the GM of the Texas Rangers. He pitched in the big leagues, 86 to 90, 91, threw probably more fastballs than anybody at baseball. He's tall. He's got deception. The angles were different. He pitched a game against the Marlins where he was telling me, where they told him before the game, oh, this is a young Marlins team. You're going to really have to throw your breaking ball. You're going to have to, change speeds with them. And Chris had his own scouting report and said, forget that. So Chris threw 108 pitches, 102 fastballs, and threw a 2-hit, not one of them over 90 miles an hour, and threw a 2-hit shutout. And he just threw the fastball 2 inches up out of the zone and took advantage of the Marlins' aggressiveness. And sometimes when I talk to my pitchers and we talk about, you're not always trying to throw what they're not looking for. Sometimes the best thing you can do as a pitcher is to throw what the guy's looking for, but to make a good pitch and throw it just out of the zone. And you get a lot of easy outs, right? Pitch to contact, right? So Chris knew that they would swing at the high fastball, but he knew they couldn't hit it. So all they did was hit pop-ups to the infielder, pop-ups to the center fielder. The idea of always trying to throw what the guy's not looking for doesn't work.
And now with this whole launch angle thing, there's these people, online that will say, oh, these pitchers today, they get so many strikeouts, and the guys from 20 years ago, 40 years ago, whatever, wouldn't even be in AAA. And I say, well, I mean, you don't think Randy Johnson could pitch in any era? Like, he would figure it out. Like, you don't think Pedro could pitch in, like, they would. I think that these guys would be even more dominant because they know that there are a lot more holes in a launch angle swing than there are in a contact swing.
Pedro Martinez and Randy Johnson right now would be the best 2 pitchers in baseball. There's no doubt. Their competitiveness, their toughness. Everybody's so enamored with the velocity. Well, let me tell you one thing. The guns right now are so tuned. The guns are literally reading the ball the instant it leaves the hand. If you go online and do pitch tracks or whatever, and you watch sort of the perceived velocity, where it will show you the velocity at every increment to home plate. It might leave a guy's hand at 100. It's 91 at home plate. It's different. The guns, when we were playing, read the ball halfway to home plate, or even some of the old guns read the ball literally at the minute. There's no way, even with all the accusations, there's no way you can tell me that like a Roger Clemens would be throwing harder when he was 40 than when he was 26. The technology is so finely tuned right now. The guns that we use, the stalkers and everything else, they literally read the ball the instant it comes out of the hand. Well, gravity and forces, resistance starts to impact the speed of balls. It's not, you see guys throwing in the hundreds getting hit all the time, right? So, that argument right there with the way they pitched, the elite pitchers would still be really, really good. And as you mentioned, the idea of the launch angle, and to me, more importantly, the attack angle. The attack angle is actually the swing itself. If it's too steep, it's not going to work, right? So I see all these young kids in the batting cage literally starting the bat as low as they can and trying to hit the ball straight up into the top of the cage, and they're not capable of hitting a ball out of the ballpark. Well, pitchers would literally, I can batting practice, I can throw them a 60 mile an hour pitch up and out over the plate and let them hit a 275-foot fly ball to right field every time, and it's going to be an out. So, the first thing we do with our guys is we try to get them to tell us what type of players they should be. Right? Tell us what type of player you think you should be. If you're not a home run hitter, why are you trying to hit home runs? Right? Be a guy who can slap the ball around. Be a guy who can bunt for a single. Be a guy who can move runners over. Find a way to be productive and help win the game. My generation, the Charlie Laus, the Walt Reniacs, who were sort of the two premier hitting coaches when we were playing, taught level swings. And with a level swing, we weren't trying to hit ground balls. We were trying to hit line drives and balls up gaps and balls that over the fence. But they didn't believe that happened with a big uppercut swing. Again, I'm older, so for any of the young people, go get the Ted Williams Science of Hitting book. And on the front page of that book, there's a ball strike area where it talks about what Ted Williams thought he could hit at every pitch in the strike zone. And Ted Williams always believed in a slight uppercut. Slight, not swinging straight up, and some of these guys, they think about swinging up, they get big loops in their swing to try to swing up, and then they have no chance to hit anything above the belt. And your attack angle, to me, is dependent on what type of pitch and what type of pitcher you're seeing. I mean, I'm trying to get my barrel of bat on plane with the ball, and I'm not going to swing at it at the same attack angle if it's a big breaking ball. If it's a big breaking ball, as opposed to if it was, a four-seam fastball. So it's different. It's just, again, I think we get too technical sometimes these days with terms and angles and numbers and all that stuff. I think it's got to be a little bit more feel involved.
Ted Williams he made it so simple in baseball, but in life. I apply this to life. Get a good pitch to hit. Right. And if you apply that to life, it's like put yourself in position to succeed. Right. And that's how you work in a bat and all those reps and everything that you're working on. That leads to getting a good pitch to hit. And then when it's there, you could actually hit it. Right.
It is. Command of the strike zone is really important. But, for me, I know I was what I called the volume swinger. I couldn't go up and take 5 pitches and then get one swing and feel like I could hit it. I had to go up with a little bit more of an aggressive mentality. Making a first pitch out is so frowned upon in the big leagues right now that I see a lot of hitters get themselves, in trouble. If you're facing some of the Garrett Coles and these guys, the last thing I want to do is give them strike one. But I think the problem that we have right now is there's so much data. And I think the pitchers sit back and they analyze every hitter. Here's what the hitters go into the game with the idea that I need to work a count. I need to see pitches. Pitchers go into the game with the idea that, and I've asked my pitchers this too all the time. I say, every pitch you throw, what are you looking for? And I bet over half of the young pitchers right now say a called strike or a swing and miss. The veteran pitcher says, I want a ground ball. I want a pop up. I want to get an out on this pitch. So we have a bunch of pitchers that all they're trying to do is throw as hard as they can for 2 or 3 innings because they know they're coming out. They're trying to try to throw every ball on the corner of the plate. They're trying to make every pitch as nasty as possible. And we have hitters who are trained to go up and work the count and wait till they get a good pitch. So you know what happens? There's a lot of nothing. There's a lot of walks and there's a lot of strikeouts and there's not a whole lot of put in play. And to me, it has more to do with philosophies. Hitters are trying to wait pitchers out and pitchers are trying to throw every pitch unhittable.
Amen. Amen. I mean, let's harken back to Gary Sanchez then, right? Like there was stuff, you mentioned it before, how last year, all of a sudden, every Yankee catcher is kind of taught the same way, but he's the one the spotlight is on the most. And, as a result, his already suspect defense carries over into the batter's box, and he doesn't hit either. So when you have a guy like that, who's, I mean, look, you can't deny his talent. I mean, if you've seen the guy in his first few years, he obviously could hit. He has a great swing, uppercut or not. And, he has tools behind the plate, but he had put it together earlier, and he seems to have just regressed so severely. So for a guy like that, can Gary Sanchez be fixed, Scott, in your opinion?
I do, and I think you just have to get the right people around him. I think, to be real honest, I think one of the things that happened in the Yankee organization was that Tony Pena left, right? And I think Tony Pena was was a coach and had a great relationship, with Gary. Over the course of the last year or so, I just never liked Gary's setup behind the plate as a catcher. I thought he looked awkward. I talked about flexibility, and it's hard to then move and react, especially with as hard as these guys are throwing these days. Still, no matter what, I've spent enough time as a catcher and with umpires. You have to be quiet. You have to get into a comfortable stance. You can't have a lot of movement. And at one point, he was so wide in his stance, he had to sway back and forth on pitches, and just with the movement, he was just taking pitches out of the strike zone when he would catch them. He had a hard time then getting down into position to block. But that's a tough one for Brian Cashman, because he could turn around and go somewhere else and get the right coaching and have somebody really believe in him or whatever, and all of a sudden be 40 home runs and being I don't think he'll ever be more than a serviceable MLB catcher. Sort of like you, we started out the whole day with the conversation, about Piazza and Matheny. Gary Sanchez, I don't know enough about the intangibles. I know he's had a couple issues with being lazy, not running some balls out and stuff like that, which I don't think really works well when you are a catcher. I think the effort and all that stuff always has to be there. But it's a tough one. You have to look at the well-being of the team, and if you find somebody that's out there that, that's going to make you a better team, that may still be a good hitter, but maybe not as good as Sanchez, but a better catcher, then maybe that's the direction they end up going. But I think he can be fixed, and I think he can, again, at least become a serviceable major league catcher and get that confidence back to be a guy who's hitting 40 home runs.
Well, I think that this is probably the make or break year. I just sensed that after what we saw in the playoffs last year, where he got benched for Kyle Higashioka, that, the leash is short, but they're definitely giving him a real shot in spring training, and he's catching Garrett Cole at the moment. So we'll see about that. And like you said, if Garrett Cole decides that he wants to throw to somebody else, then the other guy's going to be in the lineup. That's just pretty much the way that goes, right?
I think, one of the stats I'm going to get, so else, I think if, I know people look at all these different numbers, but, if you, when Higashioka is catching and Garrett Cole's pitching, if opponents have a 105 batting average, and when Sanchez is catching, they have a 350 batting average. And I know people don't like ERA as much, but if a pitcher's giving up significantly more runs in a big sample size with one guy catching, you know what? Sanchez isn't going to catch every game anyway, so maybe that one day a week. That's sort of what happened with me in Seattle for a while. I mean, I was a backup player, but, Randy Johnson wanted me to catch. So that was the one day a week that I would catch, was when Randy was going to pitch.
And then you'd need the next 4 days for your hand to recover, right?
Randy was easy to catch because the ball had some upwards to it. The guys that are hard to catch, and anybody that's listening that's caught before, they'll tell you the same thing. The guys that are hard to catch, where your hand is, are the big, heavy sinker ball guys. The guys who throw the big, hard cannonball. Not as many pitchers are throwing them anymore, but they're the guys that beat you up, and the guys that throw a lot of breaking balls in the dirt. When pitchers are wild high like Randy was, it's easy to catch. It's not bad at all.
I would imagine Kevin Brown would be the worst nightmare of that, because
he was no fun to hit. So I'm sure, Timlin, Those guys that threw that type of they're no fun to catch because of the sink. They're the ones that you need to ice your hand down after the game.
I saw you mention Bob Tewksbury on Twitter. I bring him up a lot because I think that a guy like that, if he popped into the major leagues these days, guys would have said they'd swing at him like Bugs Bunny. Like they would just miss all the time with the way he moved the ball all the way around. And with these guys trying launch angles, I think
I have a perfect comparison for him is Kyle Hendricks, right? You know, you watch Kyle Hendricks picks and that's Tukes. And the thing is, you look at both those. With Kyle Hendricks, when he was at Dartmouth and he pitched against us early on, he was a 93, 94 mile an hour guy. He had some arm injuries and sort of figured out that he could pitch his way. And Tukes was the same way. Bobby Tewksbury and I played together against each other in the Cape Cod League. And then we played with each other for the first like 3 or 4 years of our minor league career. And he had life. I guarantee you, we didn't have spin rate back then, but boy, his fastball really had some late life. And I'm sure the spin rate was very, very high. Had several arm injuries, had to regroup, and lost that life on the fastball, but just had a big overhand breaking ball that he could really spin, that he could throw for a strike anytime he wanted to. And, you know, we teach most of the young pitchers right now to pick a half of the plate. They're not good enough at young ages to be thrown for the corners. Inner half, outer half. That is, they get a little bit better. Inner third, outer third. Well, with Tukes, he literally was throwing one black and the other black. And if he got a strike on a black, he'd throw it about 2 more centimeters off the plate away. His command was that good. And he dealt with a lot. I mean, if people want to read his book, if people want to, you know, bring him to speak to their organizations, you know, he's been a mental skills coach for 3 or 4 big league teams. He's been through it all. He's been through injuries. He had to regroup. He had just a terrific guy and a great personality. And to me, somebody that I've had my own kids talk to at times because he's got such a good perspective on baseball and life.
Well, I might talk to you offline because I'd love to have him on here. I mean, I think that would be great. He's just what I'm looking for, you know. Love to pick brains like his, like yours. This is outstanding. That people in the comments are absolutely loving it. Let's talk a little bit about the stuff you did on the field. I jotted down some notes. I want to see how good your memory is, Scott. I want to see how good your memory is. 18 career home runs, all with the Mariners. And as you talked about before, for those who haven't looked you up, go look them up. Left-handed bat. You had 22 career starts against left-handed pitchers and 1 home run in your career against a left-handed pitcher. Can you tell me who that pitcher was?
I know it was the Baltimore Orioles.
Okay, you're right on that.
I know it was the Baltimore Orioles, and because I had faced him in AAA, and if you told me the name, I would remember it. But you know what's so weird? I can literally close my eyes, and I can remember the pitch, I can remember the delivery, and I can remember where it ended up in the kingdom.
But you can't remember that it's Jack O'Connor.
Jack O'Connor. You said that, now I would know it. But again, it's funny because you mentioned that. And I guess that's because I hit so few home runs in my life. I can literally remember it. I actually didn't even start the game that day. I think I came in late and ended up sort of a week. I think it was kind of a blowout game. So it was just an add-on run at the end of the game.
So the other stats, 14 homers in the Kingdom, 4 on the road, 1 at County Stadium, 1 at the old Yankee Stadium, 1 at Memorial Stadium in Baltimore, not the one off of Jack O'Connor, and 1 at Tiger Stadium. So there's no park standing where you hit a home run anymore. That kind of stinks, right?
I'm old.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, but now it's a feat that nobody can match, right? Like it'll never be matched again. Nobody can come up and hit a home run in Tiger Stadium anymore. The other one is August 10th, 1987, 2 homers off of Dave Stewart. That might have been his Cy Young year. Might not, but it was close. Dave Stewart was Dave Stewart in 1987. And how about this? 3 homers of your 18 off of Richard Dotson, none in the same game. So what was it about Richard Dotson? Do you ever run into Richard Dotson and say, "Hey, Rich, I own you"?
No, but you know what? I caught him with the because we were teammates with the White Sox. So we were teammates with the White Sox, so I got to know him a little bit, and it's just one of those weird coincidences, that's for sure.
Well,
nobody was really worried. Nobody was really worried when I came up to the plate about me hitting a home run off of him. That's for sure. I was more apt to hit a soft line drive over the shortstop's head.
Well, that's that. Hey, it got you 9 years in the bigs, right? So that's sounds like a good formula to me. And Randy Johnson's chosen catcher. All right, let's circle back and bring it into family before we wrap it up. You have an older brother Bob and a younger brother Jeff, and rarely have I seen three more accomplished brothers than you three. So I want you to tell us, just give us a couple of good tidbits about your brothers there, because I, as a sports writer for the entirety of the '90s, I've known and written about your brother many times. I never knew he was your brother until I was starting my research here. So
You know, it's interesting. One of the other sort of highlights of my career was I was able to be on the field as Ken Griffey Jr. and Ken Griffey Sr. played together. You know, and I used to joke around with those guys all the time, saying, you think it's so cool to be a father and son, you know, playing together in the major leagues. I said, get this one. I said, my family, we have a player, me, a coach, my brother Bob, and a member of the media, my brother Jeff, in the same family at the same time. So it's really nice. I'll start with Jeff. My younger brother Jeff graduated from North Carolina as well, and their terrific journalism program. You know, worked for the AP for a little bit, and then, you know, covered the Yankees. Was a beat writer for the Yankees, you know, for a number of years with the Daily News and a little bit with the Star Ledger. They did some work for Sports Illustrated. He was one of the original hires at ESPN, the magazine, and did some amazing stories at ESPN, the magazine. In fact, if people want to go back a long time ago, he wrote a story called Gen X. It was the first steroid article written about MLB, about how the owners knew about it and they didn't really care. So if people want to go back historically and look at that article, it was terrific. And, you know, Jeff's amazing for all the people out there. He started a baseball glove company called Bradley Gloves that is geared for the 6 to 12-year-old player. There's just no market for it, you know. So if anybody has that 6 to 12-year-old player, the gloves are crafted really well. They break in really well. You can just Google it and you see it. So, and he's also in the soccer world. He's director of media relations for Toronto FC in the MLS. And then my older brother Bob might be the smartest person that I've ever been around. He's a Princeton grad, you know, in the soccer world. Coached at Princeton for a number of years. When the MLS started, he became Bruce Arena's you know, assistant initially. Then he took over his own team. He's been the MLS Coach of the Year a few times. His son Michael was captain of the U.S. national team for a number of years, is still playing with Toronto FC, has played around the world. Well, after my brother was let go by the U.S. national team, I mean, you talk about an amazing thing. Bob coached the U.S. national team in the World Cup in South Africa, and Michael was playing for him. So, you know, you talk about just an amazing experience. And then after the U.S. let him go, my brother took over and he became the head coach of the Egyptian national team. There have been 2 documentaries. So again, if anybody wants to really see some interesting things, Google Bob Bradley Egypt and check out these documentaries that were made on his time in Egypt right after Arab Spring. Just fascinating time in Egyptian history and stuff. He then started traveling around the world coaching European teams, and he ended up, he became the first American to ever coach in the English Premier League. He coached Swansea. They brought him over, you know, and everything else. And it was too bad, but they didn't give him a whole lot of time. 3 months later, he became the first American to be fired in the English Premier League.
Sacked.
So he was sacked. And now he coaches LAFC. He's back in the MLS. But just regarded a trailblazer in the soccer world, and talk about building team culture and smart and being able to relate to a lot of different people. That's my brother Bob. I've learned more from him about coaching than any person I've ever been around. There's no doubt about that.
And he was soccer coach at Princeton too.
He was a soccer coach at Princeton, and we overlapped for about 3 or 4 months, but no season. So I always tease him saying that as soon as I came on board, he figured he needed to leave. But he's a Princeton grad, and then he coached at Princeton. Actually took Princeton, you know, to the Final Four in soccer. There's over 300 Division I teams, and he actually went to the Final Four and lost to the, perennial national champions Virginia in the semifinals. So Bob's amazing. Like I said, if there's people out there watching that are soccer people, again, go watch these documentaries that were done about his time in Egypt. They're fascinating.
Scott Bradley, thank you so much. This was this far exceeded my expectations. I appreciate you talking with me offline and helping get this set up. Your patience for the glitch at the beginning of the show is absolutely tremendous. And when I finally get down there to Princeton to pay you a visit, there might be some kind of Italian pastry as a make good on that. We'll see. If there's, maybe one of the Rizzos will have a trip to Brooklyn sort of right before that, and then we'll get you the good stuff. I don't know. But thank you so much for giving us.
My pleasure. A lot of fun. Like I'm sure you can tell, it doesn't take much to twist my arm to get me to talk about baseball. And this whole Twitter thing has really been interesting because I said Princeton asked me to do it. I've never been a social media person, so I've had a lot of engagement with some terrific people, exchanging ideas. I tell people all the time, as soon as you think you know everything about this game, you might as well go find something else to do because you can always learn, that's for sure.
Go follow him on Twitter at Coach Bradley 9. That's the number 9. You can follow our show at Diamond Diehards on Twitter and basically every other social media network. We're at Diamond Diehards there. If you're on the Facebook group, then and you're just watching, then hit the join button or the subscribe button. And if you're on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, check us out there and subscribe. And we also put these shows on YouTube. So we've had a very active comment section over there. Chris Sidem did a lot of good stuff. The dog was on there. He couldn't be with us tonight. Uncle Paul, some of the regulars. So thank you for chiming in there. And if this is the first time you're checking us out, we'd like to keep it up, and we'll keep providing you great content. That will do it for another episode of Diamond Diehards. For the coach, Scott Bradley, this is Joe Rizzo. Diamond Diehards is out.